6 days before Thanksgiving, I sat in my attorney's parking lot with a folder of papers on my lap and my hands steadier than they had been in weeks. Behind me, in the back seat, was a canvas bag holding every document I had spent 3 days quietly collecting. My daughter had called me twice that morning with that warm, careful voice she only used when she wanted something. I had not called her back. Not because I was angry, though I was, because I already knew exactly what was coming at the dinner table on Thursday, and I needed to be ready before they realized I was. My name is Margaret Elaine Howell. Most people call me Maggie. I am 63 years old, a retired nurse, a widow, and the owner of the house where I raised my daughter for 22 years. Or at least, I was still the owner. For a little while longer. My husband Dennis passed away 3 years ago from a heart condition that had followed him most of his adult life. He knew it was coming, and being the kind of man he was, he spent the last 2 years of his life making sure I would be taken care of. Paid off the mortgage, put everything in clear order, sat with me at the kitchen table one Sunday afternoon with papers spread between us, and walked me through every single account, every policy, every number. He held my hand when he was done and said, "Maggie, you are smarter than you give yourself credit for. Do not let anybody talk you out of knowing your own life." I tried to remember that. My daughter Diane moved back home about 8 months after Dennis died. I told myself it made sense. She was going through a separation from her first husband. She had my grandson Tyler to think about, and honestly, I was lonely in a way I had not expected. Grief has a sound to it. Not crying, not that. More like the house breathing differently when only one person lives in it. Diane brought Tyler, who was 7 at the time, and the 3 of us settled into something that felt almost like a rhythm. I cooked. Tyler drew pictures at the kitchen table. Diane worked from home, ordered a lot of packages, and talked on the phone in her bedroom with the door closed. Then she met Kevin. Kevin arrived in our lives about 14 months ago. He was 41, broadly built, well-dressed in a way that felt slightly too deliberate. He sold real estate, or said he did, and he talked about property values and market timing the way some men talk about sports. Constantly, confidently, with total certainty that everyone in the room found it fascinating. At first, I tried to like him. For Diane's sake, and for Tyler's. Kevin was decent enough with the boy. He kicked a soccer ball in the backyard a few times. Took him to a movie once. Tyler liked him fine, the way children like anyone who pays them occasional attention. But I noticed things. Kevin had opinions about my house. Not rude ones. Nothing I could point to directly. More like suggestions that arrived wearing the clothes of compliments. "This neighborhood is really picking up, Maggie. You are sitting on more equity than you know. Have you thought about what you want to do with the place long term?" I would say something vague and he would smile and let it go. Until the next visit. Then the next. Diane started echoing him. "Mom, Kevin was saying the market right now is really strong for sellers. You could downsize, free up some cash, really set yourself up comfortably." "I am 63, I would tell her. "I am already comfortable." She would laugh lightly and change the subject. Then the dynamic shifted. 6 weeks ago, Diane mentioned that she and Kevin were thinking about getting married in the spring. I said congratulations, and meant it, mostly. 2 weeks after that, Kevin started joining our regular Sunday dinners. Then he started having opinions about my heating bill. Then he mentioned, just offhandedly, that a financial planner he knew had helped several older clients set up family protection trusts. Very smart, very simple, basically just making sure everything was organized so there was no confusion later. Confusion. That word again. I had heard it used before. In my years as a nurse, I learned to notice the way certain words got used around elderly patients. Confused. Forgetful. Hard to reach. Sometimes those words were honest and necessary. Sometimes they were the beginning of something else. Something that benefited the people doing the describing more than the person being described. The night everything changed was a Wednesday, almost exactly 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I had come home from my book club earlier than expected because my friend Patricia had a migraine. The house was quiet when I came in. I set my keys on the entry table, and that was when I heard Kevin's voice from the back of the house. He was on the phone in the sunroom, door half open, speaking low and fast. I should have kept walking. I did not. His voice came through clearly. "She has no idea we already have the paperwork drafted. Diane keeps her relaxed. I keep the conversation going. and by Thursday she thinks it is just a family dinner. I heard a pause. Then, the whole point is to do it in front of witnesses so it looks voluntary. Once she signs the trust amendment and the POA, the property can move within 60 days. My hand found the wall. His voice again, almost amused. She is going to be harder to convince than Diane thinks. She was a nurse. She is not stupid. But she is also lonely and she trusts her daughter. That is the lever. A low laugh from whatever voice was on the other end of the line. Kevin said, "Just make sure the notary is available Thursday evening. We will handle the rest." Then silence, as he ended the call. I stood in the hallway for what felt like a very long time. My heart was doing something strange and fast in my chest. Not panic, exactly. Something older and colder than panic. The feeling of someone you love becoming a stranger in front of you while wearing a completely familiar face. I went to my room. I did not make dinner that night. I told Diane I had a headache and heard her tell Kevin I had seemed off lately. Those words drifted through my door before she pulled hers shut. Off lately. I lay in the dark and thought about Dennis and what he would have done. Dennis was not a dramatic man. He did not shout, did not make speeches. He would have gotten very quiet, made a list, and started at the top. So that is what I decided to do. Over the next 2 days, I moved carefully. I did not change anything visible. I smiled at breakfast. I complimented Kevin on a jacket he wore. I let Diane hug me when she offered. And quietly, privately, I pulled out every document Dennis had filed and organized, reviewed every account, looked at every authorized name. Kevin was not on anything yet, neither was Diane, but there had been a request, I found, buried in my email. A form from a financial services firm asking me to confirm authorization for a new account representative. I had not opened that email. It had arrived 3 weeks ago and I had assumed it was spam. It was not spam. The firm was one Kevin had mentioned. Once, in passing, weeks earlier, I had not connected it at the time. I called my bank the following morning from my car, parked 2 streets over so no one in the house would hear. I explained what I had seen and what I had overheard. The woman on the phone was patient and careful. She flagged the account. She referred me to their fraud liaison. She also, very quietly, suggested I might want to speak with a private attorney before Thursday. I called one that same afternoon. His name was Robert Caldwell. He had been Dennis's attorney and had handled our estate planning years ago. I had not spoken to him in over a year. He remembered me immediately. When I explained the situation, including the overheard call and the drafted paperwork I had not yet seen, he went silent for a moment. Then he said, "Maggie, you did the right thing calling me. Come in tomorrow morning." I went. I brought everything I had. He reviewed it all and told me several things I needed to hear. The trust amendment Kevin referenced would, if signed, give Diane and Kevin joint authority to make financial decisions on my behalf. The power of attorney, if broadly worded, could include real estate transactions. Together, those 2 documents could allow them to list and sell my house without needing my ongoing cooperation. Especially, he said carefully, if my competency were ever brought into question, there it was. The thing I had not wanted to name out loud. They were not just planning to take my money. They were building a paper path in case I said no. A way to make my no irrelevant. I sat in that office chair with my hands very still in my lap and made a decision. I would not warn them. I would not confront them alone. I would let Thursday come, and I would be ready. That was when something unexpected happened. I came home that afternoon to find a plain white envelope propped against my front door. No name on it. No return address. Just my street number written in pencil on the front. I picked it up slowly. Inside was a single folded page, handwritten. It said, "Mrs. Howell, I do not know if you are already aware of this, but I believe you should be. I have information about Kevin Marsh that your daughter may not know. My number is below. Please call from somewhere private. I am not trying to cause harm. I am trying to prevent it." It was signed only with a first name. Carol. I stood at my front door for a moment, thinking hard. Then I thought about what Dennis had said. Do not let anybody talk you out of knowing your own life. I went back to my car. I called the number. Carol picked up on the second ring. Her voice was composed and a little tired, like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a while and was relieved to finally set it down. She told me she was a paralegal. She had worked for a small real estate investment firm 2 years ago. Kevin Marsh had been a client. She had watched him work through a similar situation with another woman, a widow in her late 60s, in a town 2 hours north. He had been engaged to the woman's adult niece. The property had sold within 4 months of a signed trust document. The woman had moved into a smaller rental. She never fully understood what had happened until it was over. Carol had kept copies of certain documents from that case. Not everything, but enough. She brought them to me the next morning. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with careful eyes and a measured way of speaking. She sat at my kitchen table while Diane was at Tyler's school pickup and Kevin was at what he described as a showing, and she laid out what she had. Email correspondence between Kevin and an investment contact about my property specifically. A draft version of the trust amendment with notes in the margins. Language about how to present the document to the grantor. One note read, "Frame as protecting the grandchild's future stability. Works well with sentimental subjects." Sentimental subjects. I read that line twice. Carol also told me something I had not known. Kevin had looked into my finances before he and Diane started dating seriously. She had seen a search request in the old firm's system. He had known about the house, the equity, the paid mortgage, before the relationship was 3 months old. After Carol left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Tyler came home and dropped his backpack by the door and wanted a snack, and I made him apple slices with peanut butter and watched him eat them, and thought about how none of what was happening was his fault. Not one piece of it. He was 8 years old, and he loved his mother, and he called me Grandma Maggie, and sometimes fell asleep on my couch watching cartoons, and none of that had anything to do with the calculation happening around him. I gave him a second apple slice and told him I loved him. He said, "I know, Grandma Maggie. You always say that." I said, "I always mean it." He went back to his show. By Tuesday I had spoken to Robert Caldwell twice more. By Wednesday morning I had a clear plan. Robert would be present at my house Thursday evening, arriving after dinner began. The bank's fraud liaison, a woman named Susan Prater, had confirmed she would join by phone if needed. Carol had agreed to be reachable. I had also done one more thing. I had called Diane's Aunt Rosie, Dennis's sister, who had known Diane since she was born and who lived 40 minutes away and who I trusted completely. I explained what I had overheard. There was a long silence. Then Rosie said, "Tell me what time to be there." Thursday arrived grey and cold, the way late November mornings do in this part of the country. I got up early and made the pie I had been planning to make all week, because routine matters when everything underneath it is shaking. Pecan, from Dennis's mother's recipe. I rolled the crust by hand and listened to the radio and let the kitchen smell like butter and brown sugar, and I breathed through it. Diane came down in a good mood, prettier than usual, wearing a blouse she had clearly chosen for the occasion. Kevin arrived by noon with wine and a careful smile and a handshake for Tyler that the boy accepted politely. I watched Kevin move through my kitchen, touching the counter edge, looking at the window over the backyard, and I understood what he was doing even if no one else could see it. He was already calculating dimensions. He was already somewhere else. Dinner was pleasant, the way a held breath is pleasant. Rosie arrived at 5, which was the plan. Kevin was mildly surprised to see her but recovered quickly. Diane hugged her and said she had not known she was coming. I said I had invited her last minute, that it was Thanksgiving week and I wanted family around. Kevin smiled and poured her wine. He had no reason yet to feel anything but comfortable. We ate. The food was good. Tyler told a long story about something that happened at recess. Rosie laughed in all the right places and kept her eyes calm when she looked at me. Then Kevin set down his fork and looked around the table with the particular expression of a man who has rehearsed something. He said, "I just want to say, being here with this family means a great deal to me. And I think, going into a new year, going into a new chapter for all of us, it makes sense to talk about the future, making sure everyone is protected. Especially you, Maggie. And especially this little guy." He nodded at Tyler. Tyler looked up from his pie, confused and unbothered, then went back to the pie. Kevin reached beside his chair and brought up a leather folder. He set it on the table and opened it slowly, the way people do when they want something to look formal and inevitable. Diane put her hand on my arm. Her touch was gentle and I felt the practiced quality of it, the way it had been prepared rather than felt. Diane said, "Mom, we just want to make sure things are simple for you, that if anything ever happened, there was no confusion." No delay, no stress on you. There was that word. Confusion. I looked at the folder. There were 2 documents tabbed with those small, coloured sticky arrows that indicate where to sign. I recognized the trust amendment language from the draft Carol had shown me. Kevin said, "It is really just a formality. Robert would say the same thing, I am sure." I looked up at that. At that exact moment, my front door opened. I had given Robert Caldwell a key that morning. He walked into the dining room in his coat, unhurried, setting a briefcase on the side table by the wall. Kevin turned. Diane's hand lifted from my arm. Robert said, "Good evening. Maggie, sorry I am a little late." He looked at Kevin with a kind of calm that only comes from knowing exactly what you are doing. "You must be Kevin." "I am Robert Caldwell. I have been the Howell family attorney for 18 years. Kevin's expression changed in a way he could not entirely control. Not panic, but a recalculation. Kevin said, "We were just going over some family estate planning, nothing complicated." Robert sat down at the end of the table and opened his briefcase. "That is helpful to know, because I have reviewed a draft version of these documents already, and I do have several questions about the language before anyone signs anything." Kevin said, "Where did you get a draft version?" I answered that one. "From someone who has seen you do this before." The room went very still. Diane looked at me. "Mum, what is that supposed to mean?" I had thought about this moment many times in the past 4 days. I had rehearsed my own words the way Kevin had rehearsed his. But when the moment arrived, I found I did not need the rehearsal. I simply told the truth. I told her about the phone call I had overheard, the notary, the 60 days, the lever. I told her about the email forms sent without my knowledge. I told her about Carol and what she had witnessed 2 years ago, in another town with another widow, and what happened to that woman's house. As I spoke, Diane's face did something I had not expected. It did not harden. It came apart. Slowly. The way a careful arrangement falls when the table it rests on shifts. She looked at Kevin. Kevin said, "Diane, this is not what she is making it sound like." She said, "Kevin, you told me this was to protect her." He said, "It is. Maggie is making this into something it is not." Rosie spoke for the first time. She said, "Kevin, I have known this family for 30 years. I have known this woman for 30 years. She is one of the clearest-minded people I have ever met. So I am going to ask you directly to look me in the eye and tell me why a paralegal from your previous business has documentation connecting you to the financial loss of another widow." Kevin did not look her in the eye. He looked at the tablecloth. Robert spoke then, evenly and without drama. He explained what the documents would have done if signed. He explained the property transfer timeline. He explained what power of attorney combined with a trust amendment would have enabled. He used plain language, the kind that does not require a law degree to understand, and he spoke to Diane throughout. Not to Kevin. Not to me. Diane pressed her fingertips against her mouth. Kevin said, "I was trying to help us." He said it quietly, almost to himself. "We are underwater, Diane. You know that. I thought if we could access the equity, just for a bridge loan situation, we could get stable and pay it back before." Diane said, "You told me she agreed to this." He said, "She would have. Once she understood the benefit." Diane stood up from the table. It was not a dramatic gesture. She simply stood up the way someone does when they realize they cannot remain seated any longer. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she looked at me, and her eyes were full of something I recognized. Not guilt exactly. More like the specific grief of understanding something you have been trying not to understand. She said, "Mom, I thought it was real estate planning. He told me you had already talked about it." I said, "I know." She said, "I would not have." I said, "I know that too." Tyler looked between all of us with the wide, focused attention of a child who knows the adult room has changed but does not yet have words for how. I reached over and put my hand on his and told him we were going to have pie now, and that everything was fine, and he could take his slice to the living room if he wanted to watch TV. He took the pie and went, glancing back once at the doorway. Kevin tried once more. He said, "Maggie, I understand this looks bad, but I was acting in good faith." A badly chosen phrase. Robert looked up from his papers. Acting in good faith does not typically involve pre-arranging a notary, drafting documents without the property owner's knowledge, or using prior methodology established in other cases. Kevin did not answer that. He left within 20 minutes. He took his leather folder. He left the wine. After the door closed, The house was quiet enough that I could hear the television from the living room, where Tyler was watching something with cheerful sound effects. Rosie poured herself more coffee. Robert gathered his papers with the unhurried efficiency of a man who has done difficult things many times and understands that calm is a form of kindness. Diane sat at my kitchen table while I cut the pecan pie, and she cried in a way that was not for show, not loud, just quiet and steady, the way real crying usually is when it is not meant for an audience. She said, "I thought he loved me." I set a slice of pie in front of her. I said, "I know you did." She said, "How did I not see it?" I said, "Because you wanted it to be real. There is nothing shameful about wanting something to be real." She looked up. I said, "What is shameful is what he was willing to do with that wanting. That belongs to him, not to you." She cried a little more. I let her. Rosie rubbed her back and didn't say anything, which was the right thing to do. The days that followed were not simple. They rarely are when the truth finishes arriving. Robert filed a formal report with the state bar regarding Kevin's conduct. The bank flagged several irregularities connected to the investment firm. Carol provided her documentation to the appropriate parties with no pressure from me, simply because she had made a decision to do what she had not done the first time she saw this happen. Kevin's engagement to Diane ended. He did not make it dramatic. He left the way people leave when they know the performance is over and the audience has seen through it. Just suddenly, quietly, no longer there. Diane stayed. That was her choice, and I want to be clear, I did not ask her to make it. I told her that whatever she decided, Tyler would always be welcome in my house, and so would she, as long as we were honest with each other. She said she did not know where else to go. I said that was a good enough reason to stay. For a while, she was embarrassed in the way that is hard to be around, apologizing too often, watching me too carefully, reading meaning into ordinary silences. I told her once, and only once, that she could stop carrying what belonged to Kevin, that what happened was not a referendum on who she was as a daughter or as a person. It was a lesson about what charm can disguise and how much a person can overlook when they are afraid of being alone. She asked me how I had not been angrier at her. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, "Because I remember what loneliness made me overlook in other parts of my life. It is very hard to see clearly when what you want most is someone to stay." She nodded. She understood that. Tyler asked once, a few weeks later, why Kevin did not come to dinner anymore. Diane answered him herself. She said Kevin had moved on and we were still a family, just the three of us again. Tyler looked at her, and then at me and said, "Plus Grandma Maggie makes better pie anyway." Diane laughed, real and surprised, the first real laugh I had heard from her in weeks. I laughed too. Some things stay broken. I will not pretend otherwise. There is a new distance in how Diane and I talk about certain things, a carefulness that was not there before. I do not think it will fully go away. Trust, once it has been repaired, does not always look like what it looked like before. It can look like something steadier, actually, more honest, less built on what people want to believe about each other, and more built on what they have actually shown. I updated my documents with Robert. I learned more about my own financial situation in 1 month than I had learned in the previous 5 years, and I was a little ashamed it had taken this to make me pay attention. Dennis had tried to teach me. I had let comfort make me lazy. That was on me. I will not make that mistake again. I also wrote a letter to Carol. Not an email. A real letter. Paper. And ink. I thanked her for what she had done, and told her what her choice had meant. She wrote back. Her grandmother had lost her home in a situation not entirely unlike this one, and she had never gotten to help her. Helping me was the closest she could get to having done something about it then. I thought about that for a long time. About the people who do the right thing because someone they loved was failed and they are still carrying it. About how those small, courageous acts move through time in ways we cannot always track. On a Saturday morning in early December, I made cinnamon rolls from scratch. Tyler helped me press the dough flat and got powdered sugar on his sleeve, and did not care at all. Diane sat at the kitchen table with coffee, and looked out the window at the backyard and said, quietly, that she was grateful. Not for everything that had happened, just for still being here, for still having somewhere to be. I said I understood exactly what she meant. That evening, after Tyler was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table alone with tea going cold in my mug the way it always does because I never drink it fast enough. The house was quiet in the particular way it gets in winter, close and still and warm from the inside out. I thought about Dennis. I thought about the Sunday afternoon at this same table, when he had walked me through our papers with his patient teacher's voice and held my hand when he was finished and told me I was smarter than I gave myself credit for. He was right. It took me longer than it should have to believe him, but I got there. If this story reached something in you, it is probably because you already know that love does not require you to sign away the life you built. That family is not a debt you spend yourself to pay. That being kind is not the same as being blind, and growing older does not make your voice less true. You are allowed to know your own life. You are allowed to protect it. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to let the wrong ending get written.